Hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer. In this video, we're discussing further details on one of my reading plans for 2025, and that is the selection of 5 random books from 3 authors. That's Dean Koontz, Richard Lehman, and Stephen King, and also the author deep dives where I have a list of authors for different genres and I choose one author from that list, or I don't choose them. It's randomly selected by a random picking program. So let's dive in first into selecting books from one of the authors, and the first author will be Dean Koontz. So as I described in a previous video, I have a list of books from Dean Koontz that are on my shelves, and I want to clear more books from my shelves. So this random picking program will select 5 random books from that list. It will select them one book at a time, and each time a book is selected, that book is removed from the list, and then it just goes along and selects the second random book, and so on until 5 books are selected. So let's start with the first book. I have to get it started on my tablet, and I'll click Submit Now. Okay, the first book selected is Innocence. Look, I'm not sure if that's the book I'd want to read first from the list of books I have on my shelves from Dean Koontz, but it's chosen for me randomly, so I have to read it in 2025. Let's go along with the second book. Press Submit on my tablet. So One Door Away from Heaven. Okay, interesting. I'm not sure if that's a book I would select. There are some books on there I really want to read from Dean Koontz next year, but I have to get these random 5 books read first. Let's go ahead with book 3. The Door to December. Interesting choice. I'm still waiting for some really key books on there I want to read in 2025. Let's go ahead with the 4th book. Press Submit now. So Lightning. Now, I do like this book. I read this the last time, I think maybe in my teens or early 20s, so I'm looking forward to reading this again. But of course, when I read it, it's being cleared from my shelves. My plan is not to hold on to books. Let's go with book 5. From the corner of his eye. This is a lengthy book, but I do want to read it next year. That's all 5 books from Dean Koontz, and of course, once I read these 5 books, I can read more from Dean Koontz as well next year. Let's go with author number 2, which is Richard Lehman. Let's start with the first selection. Press Submit. Island, a good choice from Richard Lehman, and there are some good books on that list. They're all very horror type books though, and let's go with the second choice. So Quake. I don't know if I recall too much about this book, and I probably read this in my teens or early 20s, but I do want to read it again. And of course, once I read it, it goes from my shelves. Book 3. To Wake the Dead. I can't recall much about this book, but I'm looking forward to reading it next year anyway. Okay, book 4. So Resurrection Dreams. Again, I can't recall too much about this. I think I know loosely what it's about. I read it many years ago, but I do want to read it again. And let's go with the last selection for this author now. Come Out Tonight. Now, if this is the book I'm thinking of from Richard Lehmann, I'm looking forward to reading this very much. And of course, once I read these 5 books from Lehmann, I can read more books from him next year if I want to. Let's go to the last author for this selection, and that is Stephen King. Okay, book 1 from Stephen King I have to read next year is The Lisey's Story. So I don't know if that's the book I wanted to read next year. I've heard some interesting things about this book. I have not read this yet actually, so maybe a good choice because then I get to read it after all. Let's go with book 2. From a Buick 8. Another book from Stephen King I've not read, so interesting because I get to read it next year for the first time. Okay, book 3. Bag of Bones. I've read this. I think there's also a mini-series, a TV mini-series. I may have seen maybe the first part and the second part, but I do want to read this again. I do like this book. Let's go with book 4. So Dune McKee, another book from King I've not read yet. I do want to read this. I think I know what this is about. I've heard people talking about this. I've not read this myself. So another book from King I get to read next year for the first time. Let's go with the last book for Stephen King I have to read next year. So Dr. Sleep, another book from King I've not read yet. So interesting. For the Stephen King selections, 4 of the 5 books I've not read yet. They've been on my shelves for a long time, I just haven't read them for some reason. But next year, I have to read them. So it gets them read and cleared from my shelves. And of course, once I read those 5 books, I get to read more books from Stephen King if I want to. So let's find out now about the author deep dives. And for these deep dive authors, what I've done, I have 3 lists. I have a crime mystery list of authors, a sci-fi fantasy list, and another list. And in each list, I have authors where I have some books on my shelves, and for other books, I'll get them from the library, Kindle Unlimited, whatever. But I have to concentrate on books from those authors first that are selected. I can read other authors from the list if I choose to, but I have to read primarily books from those authors first. And if I get to clear all the books they have, then I can open up and read other authors as well. And maybe I'll just go along and choose another author from the list if I clear all books from one author. But some of these authors have many books, so I don't know. Maybe I'll just have one author from each list for next year. Who knows? It'll be interesting to find out anyway. Let's go with the first list, which is the crime mystery list. And as the list goes through the random selection, you'll see some of the authors on that list anyway. Okay, we have Ian Rankin as the crime mystery author for the deep dive. So maybe not my first choice. There are other authors on there I hoped for before Ian Rankin, but the random list has selected Ian Rankin, so I have to concentrate on him first. So anyway, he has a long-running series. I'm not sure if he has standalone books. I think he might have. And I'll have to concentrate on him primarily in the crime mystery genre. Let's go with the second list, which is sci-fi fantasy. So Katherine Kurtz. Interesting choice. I do have quite a few books from Katherine Kurtz on my shelves. I actually got them a few months ago from a secondhand bookstore I like to visit, and I'll have to get other books from other sources that I don't have, unless maybe that secondhand bookstore has more books anyway. But I'm interested to read more from Katherine Kurtz. I may have read one here or there many years ago, I can't recall, but I do have a lot on my shelves. That's a good choice, I think. But there were other authors on that list I really wanted as well. So I don't know, I'll get through Katherine Kurtz hopefully in 2025, and then I can select a second author. Let's go with the last list, which is a random selection from different genres. Okay, Clive Cussler. Maybe not my first choice, but he has many different series, some co-written. I do want to read through them. I've read a few here and there of Clive Cussler, but I haven't read the series from Go to Woe really. So I want to dive into him very much. And I don't think I'll get through all these books next year because he has many of them. And with his co-author books that are coming out with Clive Cussler, there's many indeed. So for that list, that deep dive list, I think Clive Cussler is going to be the deep dive author that I'll read from that list only. And I may read one or two here and there from other authors on the list, but look out for many Clive Cussler reads next year. So there you have some of the books I have to read next year and some deep dive authors for next year. So I have to read these books and deep dive on those authors. I have no choice. My random picking program has chosen for me. Doesn't mean I can't read other books from other authors in those genres, but I have to concentrate primarily on those deep dive authors and read the 5 random books first from Dean Koontz, Richard Lehman and Stephen King. Then I can choose other books from them as well if I want to in 2025. On my channel, I review books from all different genres. Check out my channel and subscribe. On the screen now is a link on the video for a book I'm sure you'll enjoy.